Boilerplate again, stealing directly from Jake Wharton. It's like a minute into his talk. It's something that's repetitive that can be automated. So Dagger is great because it removes boilerplate. It takes all the dependency injection, all the frameworks you need to be able to do that, and it automates that for you and gets rid of this repetitiveness. So you don't have to deal with it, which is awesome. So we love that. So now we have some definitions. We have a box of boilerplate. So we're going to talk about some of the issues we have with Dagger. But to go through a bit beforehand, I want to go over why Dagger. Certain people in this group that are here today that would say, hey, why use Dagger? Well, Android's a rocky landscape. There's a lot you can do, and there's a lot of challenges we have. And so you're having fun building your apps there. For small apps, for little toy apps, Dagger is very overweight. It's very heavy to start with. And so Dagger, very big thing, evens out the landscape for you, provides a lot of structure and stability for you. But for a small app, it is overkill. I will admit that. So some of these you can use service locator. That works great. Coin's an example of a service locator. A couple other options there. But you can just do it yourself manually for small apps. And that works out pretty well. It doesn't scale very well, but for small apps, 2-3 screens, not a lot of logic behind it and all that other things, don't spend time developing, getting into a full dependency injection framework. Just get it done quickly. It's very easy to do. But as soon as your app grows, it's kind of hard to build on that. And then it's over. And so you can have, again, service locators. They help out, but they don't scale as well as we need to. So once we get to some really big apps, that you're building, a couple 100,000 lines of code, hundreds of files, you really need something that can provide that basis, and Dagger does a great job for that. It provides a lot of good things for that. So much spiel on why use Dagger. All right. Now, next off, we're going to talk about some things Dagger has some trouble with. So everyone's probably seen a basic presenter before, and you inject some things. You inject an image loader, persistence, profile persistence, avatar, but you have some questions. What profile are we loading? What initials do we render in the avatar placeholder? And what image URL do we download? We don't know. We need some information there for that. And so a lot of times we will put something like this in our presenter. Some user ID that we need to set, it's latent in Kotlin. And to use it, we get the value in our activity or fragment, we set it, and then we can use the presenter. Unfortunately, this kind of breaks the golden rule, like the holy grail that we want with Dagger. We want the graph to build everything for us. All through the constructor, we don't want to have to do any of this, because this is bad. It causes so many problems, you have race conditions, so many things that just you have to deal with. And it's a workaround, we've gotten it to work, but it's a problem. So what we really want to do is move it there. We want that user ID provided by the constructor. Now, how do we do that in Dagger? It can be tricky. There's a couple options. We could, scope it. We can scope it accordingly, add a user ID, but then we have to, create subcomponents. We have to get the builders for those subcomponents. We have to make sure we map it. We got to make sure it's scoped correctly so it doesn't live longer than it's supposed to. And that's just a lot of boilerplate. It really is. And so it causes a lot of problems. Well, there's another option we can use, another pattern we can use, and get back to this. And it's the factory pattern. We can create a factory. And the factory, we can inject a factory where we need to and provide all the things that are provided dependencies. And then we can have a nice little easy create function that creates our factory for us with private and provides the one in there. So now we have good, solid dependency injection principles, everything in through the constructor. We can go forward. That's awesome. But there's some problems with this. first off, I mean, how many of you guys can like count how many times we have profile persistence written? You know, at least 3. If this was in Java, it's even worse. You have to add like 2 more times. And so that's another chance you could fat finger something, you could mistype, you could wrong order, all these things that just cause problems for us. And on top of that, yeah, so again, this is how it's used. Very nice, wonderful. But on top of that, one of the big issues we have is, what if those classes aren't singletons? What if they're not scoped at a certain type? They're unscoped classes. Well, in Dagger, to handle that correctly, you need to make them providers. And if you do providers, then you can get, if it's singleton or not, you can get that. And now you have all the .gets in there. That's just a lot of code that I personally don't want to write. I mean, it's just it's a lot. So again, a lot of fun, just so many things you have to keep straight, so many things you have to do all together, all at once. Yeah. Really just don't want to do that. So wouldn't it be great if I could just write this? And Dagger could say, hey, I'm smart enough, I can generate this factory. I know what it is, I know what you're trying to create. This factory pattern is a very consistent thing. You know, shouldn't we be able to do that? Well, there's a couple options of things, you know, you want this code generated. So Juice, anyone guys remember Juice? Mm-hmm. Web framework, they introduced something called assisted inject. And it's kind of cool. Assisted injects are pretty awesome. And you can basically annotate with an assisted inject, and then you annotate what you want to be assisted into there. So what you are going to provide in the graph won't. And then you write your factory interface, you annotate that. And now all this gets generated for you. Wonderful. It handles all the providers appropriately, handles just everything, so you don't have to do that. And that was back in the Juice days. It was great. We loved it. So again, implements, create method, just all of that is done for you. You don't have to write any of that code. This is great. But unfortunately, to use that, God, mine's blinking. I'm going to jump through some slides. There's some things you have to do inside your module to create that. And yeah, so we're going through. So first off, you create this this assisted inject profile presenter, and this factory that gets generated for you, you have to identify it, and you need to bind it in there. You need to create in Dagger saying, hey, this maps to this presenter type. You know, we have the concrete to the abstract. We need to do that mapping in Dagger. And you do that using binds. And again, it works pretty well. The only unfortunate part is we have to actually use generated code. We have to identify that. And I don't know if you guys, I hate having to build my code once and then put in the code I need and then build it again. So I have to do 2 builds just to get to compile. I hate that. It's really annoying. Wish I didn't have to do that. Well, yeah. And to be honest, this looks like boilerplate to me. If I have multiple factories or anything else, it's a bunch of things, and it's a pretty consistent standard. It's just there. It's always there. So we have this presenter module, and then again, our component, adding our assisted module, and all of that. And but what if instead we could just do an assisted module? They just annotate that, and then have it generate the module we need for all of our assisted injects. All those binds, all those other things, we can get that, and we don't have to build that, and we can link it in. And then we get this presenter module generated, creates the binds for us. Then all we have to do is, yes, we still have to include some generated code and put it in there. But I mean, it's a lot less I'm writing. There's hardly any boilerplate now in this. All of it's generated for us. Yeah. So, yeah, this is a great thing, and really like it. So, again, Juice provided all of that. And Jay Cord actually a couple years ago wrote a library called Assisted Inject when he was working at Square. Sorry, I'm just going to blind you here in a minute. And this library's out there right now. You can use it. And it does this Assisted Inject stuff for you and handles a lot of things that way. So it handles creating the module for you. You can use factories, does a factory pattern to be able to do your provided dependencies plus the ones you need to assist into there. It's great. And he's been working on it actively, and there's actually a bug open with Dagger right now. So they can actually take generated modules and just find them and link them in. So we don't have to reference the generated code anymore. Again, it's in progress right now. If you really want an explanation on it, watch Jake Gordon's talk. But the question is, great, so what can we use this for? We have the ability now with Assisted Inject to take things where we have parameters where we don't know at compile time what they're going to be, but we know at runtime what they are. And now we can use Dagger to kind of marry the two together. Assisted Inject to marry the Dagger and act together. So what can we use it for? We have presenters. Those are pretty awesome if you're still using them. Views. Did you know that there's a factory for views? And you can link into that. And in the Assisted Inject library, there's actually a view injection part of that library to do view injection. I don't recommend it, but in case you're just using views as kind of your overall architecture hierarchy, you can do that. And it generates everything for you, and even it generates more. View models. There's a factory for view models. View models is kind of where we're going, and it's pretty fun. Workers, anyone using the Android workers, there's a factory for that. And there's two parameters that we get at runtime, but we can inject everything instead. And that's going to give us a really great, simple, clean flow for workers. We can have constructor injection in workers instead of having to do inside the init method or other things, do this injection. So basically anything with the factory class, you can do this with. So what about fragments? There's actually a factory class for fragments. So we could do constructor injection with fragments right now, which is great. So now instead of having inside the init block, inside on create view, on activity create, wherever you're putting it, you don't have to have that inject method anymore. Your component just shrunk significantly by using Assisted Inject inside of fragments. There's a caveat though, I mean, you have to do everything through that factory, but the rules of nothing in the constructor are gone. We have a factory and we can do injection.
So Jordan?
Yes.
So I keep seeing every year like fragments are on their way out or they're still viable. Was there anything at Google I/O that talked about fragments? I assume there's still.
So Google I/O last year, they introduced navigation components or the navigation framework, and it is built specifically to use fragments. So it's a one activity application with fragments and handling navigation that way.
When I'm looking at migrating to use the navigation stuff, first step is to move all your logic into your fragments and out of your activity.
Yeah. So So fragments and view models, so when you have a really good architecture, an MVM, MVP, VM, MVP, something where you can take the logic out of the fragment and use the fragment purely as a view, fragments aren't that bad. They're not that scary anymore, and with navigation, it's even easier. So again, fragments, totally usable. I recommend them.
Navigation even supports the idea of sub-fragments, right?
Yeah, so you can do child fragments. I mean, I've done some pretty crazy things with fragments, and it feels weird at first, just because it's like there's just so much. But then when you actually isolate things, and you say, this component here that I'm building needs lifecycle, it makes so much sense to use a fragment. And fragments aren't that lightweight. There are some crazinesses about them, but they're not that bad when you follow good architecture patterns. It makes it a lot simpler to use. So that's fragments. So my next question, what about activities?
Well, we've only got one, so
Here we go, and sometimes you need two or more. So an API, an Android P, they introduced a factory for all activities, broadcast receivers, services, and content providers. Basically, anything the system builds, there is now a factory for that. Unfortunately, it's API 28, so we got a couple years before we can get there. But we're really close. We're almost to the point where we can actually have a full active graph at that level. All the way to our activities, all the way to the system classes. And we don't have to do some of the crazy things we've been doing. Our components go away almost. They'll just be an empty interface linking our modules together or building out subcomponents. I mean, it's going to be a wonderful day when we can get there. Fortunately, we've got some time to slog through first, but if you're following, using navigation, you're using the single activity, multiple fragments, it's not as bad. And it gets there pretty much.
So navigation, how far back is that supported?
14.
14. Oh.
Though if you're supporting back beyond API 21 right now, I question the viability of supporting those older devices.
Yeah.
Cost-wise, it's pretty expensive to support a very small amount of users. But if that's where your user base is, we'll support it. So yeah.
I think George did some stuff in navigation.
Yes, the Shield did too. Yeah.
Cool. So I want to talk a bit about view models. I actually want to dig into something with view models because I think it's important. I think it's something that's really going to provide some things. So my first question is, what do we want to assist in view models? What is the thing that we want to provide to view models that we need? Most of the times these things are like IDs. We've gone from a list down to a detail. We need to pass an ID into the view model to load the data. Or it's some sort of argument we need that we've passed to the fragment or the activity through the bundles, and we need to get it out and pass it to our view models. Now, Google introduced, how far back? Not a couple months ago, a new library, and they highlighted again at Google I/O called View Model Save State. Now, and they introduced an object called the save state handle, which acts just like a map. Now, the beautiful thing about the save state handle is you can default arguments into there, which is great. And it also handles save state. So if your app, not on rotation, but if your app goes into the background and is then killed and then comes back, it will restore all of that for you. And so you can keep that state there beautifully. And so in my opinion, you only need to assist inject one thing, and that's the save state handle into a view model. So with that in mind, we're going to jump into some code. All right, so this is a library I wrote. I call it View Model Inject, and it actually utilizes assisted inject, like it's a dependency on that at its core to provide us Dagger injection or assisted injection for view models. So in your class, what you'd want to do, set an activity like this. We have our view model factory. Now this is a class that is provided by the library right here, and its job is to find its the factors for your view model. It kind of stores all of those and provide the correct view model for you. So inside your view model provider, you get your view model, you do your providers, you add the factory, and you get your class, just like you normally would. All you do is just provide the factory, and you inject that into your class. Very simple. Seems like too good to be true almost. And your view model. So here's your view model, and it's pretty simple, and you annotate with that view model inject. This signifies to the compiler or to the annotation processor, hey, this is view model, we're gonna do some assisted injection, and I need you to generate the factory for it. I need you to generate all the bindings, everything else you need off of this. So we have our greeter, we have our get greeting and saying hi there. So again, pretty simple, pretty lightweight. And so then you have your module, and so you annotate to get add view model module. You only do it once, and you include that view model module onto this module that you have there. And now, all the code you need to do view model injection is generated for you. So every view model, it's that view model inject, and you do this once. Works pretty well, pretty simple. You can run this, and this is without save state, so you don't need any save state things. But now, what about save state? Because, you know, save state's awesome, provides us our activity, so let's go to that. Now, again, I'm using some of the extension functions that they provided recently, and so some of the things are a little weird here, but it works just the same. So instead, so save state, they have a factory for the view models that they provide. So we need to generate the factory from another factory. So it's a view model, save state view model factory. It's factory that makes factories. Hey, same thing. So you have a view model factory. Yeah, see that 10 times fast. And in the end, so again, extension function of view models just does the view model provider, all of that jazz. You provide your factory. And the two things the save state requires is a save state owner and your default parameters here. So in this case, I created a bundle and threw it in there, but if you're coming from an intent, I mean, you could just basically do not capitalize things and watch what you're typing. There you go. And now all my extras have been passed to my view model into the save state handle. So again, you get that, you pass it through, and then inside your view model, so that view model object, and then you just sit down and say, hey, here's the save state handle. It's going to be given to you. You don't need to provide it from the graph. It'll be assisted from the factory. And then you just get the values out of the save state handle. Very simple and easy. And then, you know, again, save state, what about the view model? Well, it's the exact same code. Save state, not save state. If you don't know if you're going to have a save state handle, you can still use the save state handle factory. You can inject that one in there and it'll handle a non-save state assisted inject if you're using it. If you know you're not going to use it, the other one's a little lighter weight and you don't have to do the factory craziness. But that's it. It's really, I mean, now you have pretty clean, simple view model injection for your whole application, passing in arguments without really having to do much that way. So, cool. Any questions? So again, this is the repository. It's up there now. It's released at 0.10. The assisted inject library is still at like 0.40. I've had them fix some things and they've committed those in, which is fun. But they're holding off to hopefully have Dagger be able to generate the code or like auto link in the modules so that you don't have to use annotate that. But so as soon as that goes 1.0 and save state goes 1.0, this library will go 1.0 as well. But it's out there, it's there to use. Again, I'm working on trying to create one for workers as well, so you can use that for, you know, using the new work manager stuff. Because it makes a lot of sense, you know, to just do standard construction injection for that. And again, please check out that talk. It was really good. If you really want to dive deep into Dagger, if you want to see some optimizations you can do for Dagger to improve your compile times, it's all in there. If you want to see the view injection stuff, he goes over it as well. So, yeah. Any questions?
Remind me the lifespan, the difference in lifespan between the save state, which is normally in the activities that they've had for years, right? Versus what you can store in your view model. Because they have kind of competing purposes, right?
They're very competing purposes. So save state, they actually, one of the Google I/O talks goes into depth about this with view models, where they actually talk about the save state handle. So save state lasts beyond the process. View models are tied directly to the process. So once the process is killed, view model goes away.
And whatever it held,
it's gone.
Gone.
Yeah. Whereas save state, anything you put in the save state, which again has a very specific size limit, things like that, gets persisted to disk, and when your app comes back, it will re-inject that back in there. A good way to test this is there's a dev setting that says kill activities once they go to the background. You can turn that on, and as soon as you hit like you switch apps or something, it'll kill that activity, and then you can come back and it'll restore from the save state. And that's a really good way to test if your save state's actually doing what you think it's doing. There's also the background process limit you can adjust on your device as well. But that's a good way to test save state to see if you're saving what you need to be saving versus not. Most,
Just remember to turn it back on.
I recommend doing it on emulator or test device, not on your main driver. But if you really want to have fun with people, turn it on your main driver and say, hey,
A lot
play
of
with
apps
this.
crash.
I was gonna say, apps will crash all the time. I was like, oh, I've got that turned on.
Some do.
Yeah.
So one of the things to call it with save state, like some views save their own save state, but I don't trust that. There's so many caveats with the view save state that it's not worth it. It's always better to save things. So like edit text and a few other things, you want to save those in your save state, those values, because those are still in flight.
Right.
Everything like that.
Yeah, it's not meant to replace your database or anything, or
No.
your preferences necessarily.
No,
It's
it's
just minor, minor stuff.
yeah, it's minor stuff that's going to live across your apps in the background. They needed to free up some space, so they killed your process, and now the user's coming back to it. So they're not restarting it from the beginning. They're just coming back to where they left off. Whereas view model is great for rotation and configuration changes because it's still in memory, and it was outside of that activity and fragment lifecycle, so there won't be garbage collected with them until they're destroyed. Cool. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, I guess we'll move on to the main event here, which is Google I/O.
Sweet.
Yeah, there's only 3 slides, so lots of talking among myself. So how many were able to go, how many went to I/O?
Whoa.
How many, so how many went to California versus how many went to Extended?
Extended.
Extended?
Extended at my house.
So for the most part, we were all able to either watch it, either there, Extended, or static computer. Sweet. So some of the things, here's a list, all the things they talked about. Granted, it's not even all of them. There's a lot more. So there's like Android Q, dark mode, gestures, native foldable live caption. Excited for that.
Live caption?
Live caption, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, there's new improved assistant that is lightning fast. I'm hoping they backport that. New Android Studio stuff, Jetpack stuff. So, we have a whole lot. What were some of your guys' favorites? What talks did you enjoy? Topics you're excited about?
My favorite one that I watched had a lot to do with the live caption. It was talking about the adaptability, like catering more to accessibility to other communities that aren't always the focus. I really like that because I think there is, like I hadn't even thought about certain things, and as I was bringing them up, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's awesome.
You can watch videos in bed and not wake up.
Right. That was my favorite thing with the live caption is, I can have no sound and still get everything people are saying.
Mm-hmm.
So mine
Yeah, I've tried to do that with like YouTube because YouTube will have auto-generated captions sometimes. It's not always accurate, so I'm hoping that this
Plus, like,
is more
we
accurate.
need to get rid of it.
But granted,
It appeared to be more accurate than the actual captions.
Pizza, wings.
let's hope it stays that way because it'll be
You
useful.
need some calories.
And then dark mode,
Yeah.
it's pretty fun. If you're running the Q beta, you can actually force all of the apps to go into dark mode. It does break some things, like captions. Captions that are black box with white text. The text color doesn't change, so it's just white boxes. Defeats the purpose of captions. But overall, the dark mode's pretty cool. And something to keep in mind with apps.
Yeah, you don't want to be that app.
Yeah.
So, like, understanding the theming behind it, using the new night. I don't know what you call it. Yeah, it's lost with the night one, like, it makes a huge difference in how simple it can be versus what we've had to do in the past for.
Yeah, that I'm pretty sure in like the past 4 dev previews of the next Android version, there's been a dark mode in the very beginning parts, then it gets stripped out. So it seems like they put a lot of effort into making sure that this will be good. My hopes. And from what I've used, it works. It looks good.
Some of you guys have tried the new internal app sharing.
Not yet.
Oh, it's great.
That's the one where you can drag the APK onto a page and
APK or bundle, so this is really big for bundles. So you can set up to your testers, you can actually get them like permissions to do it, so they can grab a bundle from your build server. Instead of them having to have like signing keys or other things to get it, they can just drag it there. It generates all the APKs you need. Then it gives them a link and they can just click on it and it will install the correct APK to their device. It's really nice, and the fact they don't force like version changes, other things like that, like you can just
What's it called?
bounce around. Internal app sharing. It's really great. It was broken until about 2 days ago. The Play Store actually crashed if you try to enable it. But they fixed it and now it's working really well. So it's been fun to use.
So you can have your CI directly uploaded to basically to the Play Store, but
Not exactly. You can have your CI do this. So it's basically you have your CI and it has, here's all the APKs or bundles that we've built. Hopefully you're using bundles. They're amazing. But now your QA, they can go there, download the version they want, drag it to this, and they can download the APK accordingly.
So this is opposed to being like an alpha tester or beta tester.
Yeah, so this is purely for internal purposes. You could give it out to some people. You need, hey, I want you to test this very specific version, things like that. And then you can name it as well, which is nice. You can say, hey, this is version whatever testing for this QA person. Or
So is this outside of the store then?
it's kind of tied into the Play Store. So you do have to opt into it on your device you're going to test with. So you have to enable dev mode, which in Android is tabbed 7 times on the version number. And then that will add this setting to your settings, and you can just turn it on. So it's really exciting, like upgrade. We're still playing around with it, but I mean, be able to test upgrades so you can grab, the current release APK and then your new app bundle, and then, test the upgrade paths. You can't. It does use different signing, so you can't just like have it install over the current Play Store version. But it does provide that.
So they use a signing key that they've
They generate.
generated.
And then you can get the signature, so you can pass them to to Firebase or anything else uses the signatures for the APIs. So the app will still work.
Cool.
So it's pretty cool. I'm excited. I'm excited about this, but it's been fun to use.
one cool, kind of along that, the in-app updates, like forcing updates.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
That sounds really exciting to me.
Pain in the neck to get updates on it.
It's, yeah. So I was trying to put it into one of our apps and decided, 2 days before release, probably not the best time to add a feature like this.
It's supposed to be minimal disruption compared to.
So it's interesting.
normal
So
route.
you do need to design it because you have the 2 modes. You got the immediate and the flexible. And with the flexible, you have full control over how the UI looks, how it fits and feels. So you want to work with your designers for that. Unfortunately, there's just a lot of, depending on how your app is, like they recommend you everywhere you can come into the app, you need to handle recovering from a pause update if you're doing immediate, and also triggering showing the update to users. And they also don't recommend showing it every time you have an app update. You really should be selective even with the flexible one, according to their documentation. But it's kind of simple, but at the same time, there's just a lot of best practices when you need to find around. I'm excited for when they actually colonize it and have the function extensions and other things.
Nice. What were y'all's thoughts on Project Marble with Android Studio, them polishing it off rather than just continuing to put in updates, new features?
Only because I can't use it.
I will say one of the things I'm most excited about with Project Marble is the separation of Studio and the build Gradle file, or the Android Gradle plugin. So they're not going to force you to have both, or have them both up to date. And so, I mean, the nice thing is it means I can take the latest Canary or other things and still have the rest of my team on an older version, a little more stable version of Studio. Do that. That's nice.
One thing I enjoyed when they're talking about Android Studio is they told everybody that they need to give the JVM and Gradle and all that more RAM access. And they're like, 99% of our users don't use it. And I'm 1% that does get more.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend it.
Well, so the nice thing with 3.5 is it'll actually analyze your app. And if you hit the barrier, it'll actually look at your app and give you a recommendation saying, hey, you should bump it up to 2 gigs or to 3 gigs or to 4 gigs. And they give you a nice clean UI to be able to change it so you don't have to go and actually find the right Max, 4G, whatever it is. Put in the right file, they give you a nice clean UI for that.
It's definitely helped I'll be doing stuff on my machine, have no issues, and then I go help one of the other devs and they haven't. Like it's lagging and all. It's just a lot nicer. And then the new layout inspector, I'm looking forward to that. Because in my little time that I played with Flutter, they have a pretty good layout inspector there. And so I'm looking forward to that, personally.
That was one thing I was interested in, because they're expanding Flutter to, you can develop for everything.
Yeah.
Every platform,
It's
but
the
I'm
new
still,
C++.
I'm like, it's the,
The right ones compile everywhere, right?
yeah, I was a little bit skeptical too, because I'm like, I've heard this shit before, and now I'm stuck in Xamarin.
And I've played with Flutter. I actually like it. I don't like Dart. It's a nice, clean language. So I also like Kotlin too, but Dart is first. So
Speaking of Flutter, we're doing a Flutter hackathon June 1st in South Jordan. So if you go to the GDG Salt Lake webpage or meetup page, you can register there. We'll have lunch and a chance to win prizes apparently from the community that's organizing it.
my only concern with Flutter is it ends up as one of the many other Google derelict projects that are lost to the wayside.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So I actually got to spend quite a bit of time with the Jetpack Compose engineers. And it's some really fun, really good, solid principles around just how to do UI development. Having the data, the data flows down through the top, and then events just bubble up, and the states all add to your activity or at your fragment. It's no longer like this edit or like the spinner. That was one thing they call out a lot was the spinner. If you ever want to know why it's called the spinner, you can actually go to that talk and explain that if you're ever wondering. But that pattern really solves a lot of problems, and you can do that with data binding right now, and it'll help you get ready for moving into Jetpack Compose when you want to go there. But they do call out one of the big things that's nice about Compose is they recommend breaking things out into the functions and breaking them out into different components, so you don't get this super nested view where you get with most of the DSLs. So having that broken out into just things like that makes it a lot more readable, a lot more maintainable. You don't have to depend on the IDE for code reviews. You can actually do a code review in GitHub or whatever you're using and not have to count all the curly braces.
So Compose seems like Flutter. Is that there's some kind of subtle connection?
So how many of you guys watched the Fireside Chat?
Broadcast.
They did? Oh, they
The
don't.
Android, no, for some reason,
So they don't broadcast them, but they'll play it afterwards. So, like,
After they have a chance to go through and edit out any oopsie moments or.
yeah. So one of the questions they asked is, the idea behind Jetpack Compose, and they said, yeah, they actually worked with the Flutter team and, looked at this kind of reactive style of programming and seeing how it all works. And like Compose is not based on the view anymore. Like the view is gone. They dropped the whole level to the renderer to make it. So there's some pretty good possibilities for performance updates, things like that. Improvements over our current view structure in Android. Yeah, but one of the questions asked is when they moved Flutter to Kotlin, and you should have heard the cheer from the crowd.
What?
It was like the biggest cheer. It was
Say it
loud.
again. What did you say?
when they're gonna move Flutter to use Kotlin instead of Dart. And
They are gonna do that?
I wouldn't be surprised after the response they got there.
That would be cool.
Really?
That's
It-
impossible.
Really?
It's not
Flutter's a
though.
framework though.
The only thing you lose with using Dart over Flutter is the hot reload.
Right.
But
The
at
whole
the same time, Flutter, like, it's already pretty quick if you're just doing minor updates. So, in my mind, I'd rather have Kotlin and, sacrifice a few seconds.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Dart's getting to the point they're taking a lot of cues on all their updates from Kotlin. I bet a year from now it's close enough that it doesn't matter. You can keep your just-in-time compiling and your have-time compiling with
You
Dart.
just replayed C# and Java.
So it's,
Yeah.
it was interesting, and I mean, one of the things they asked about was Kotlin native, and Steph Cuthbertson and Tor Norby were like, we're really excited about Kotlin native and what it can offer and things like that. And so we're getting more and more, like, they're really heavily invested in Kotlin over there. And so it's,
They're doing the Kotlin everywhere stuff, so.
And is there a group that's going to put on an event for that around here? Do you know?
I'm not sure whether it'll be GDG or the Kotlin meetup.
I
can
asked
figure that out.
for Ron about it. He didn't have an idea yet if he was going to do something.
yeah.
Kotlin native has some implications on the back end, no more JVM.
Yep.
So,
So
faster.
yeah, it should be faster. And so some of the things like with Kotlin native and some of the things with Flutter that you give up is the ecosystem you have with the JVM. It's like retrofit, it's gone. Dagger is gone. Room, gone. All the Jetpack libraries, gone. Just because they're all built on the JVM. But GSON, Jackson, they're gone. But the Kotlin guys have done serialization now. So they've actually done a really good job with serialization. So you get GSON and Moshi-like performance with their new serialization library, and they don't use reflection at all. They don't even, pretty awesome.
That would be interesting.
And so it's cross-platform. It's from JavaScript through the JVM, also to the native. And so we're seeing more of these libraries, more of these frameworks be built up in Kotlin native. SQLite now supports Kotlin native as well. So we have a database layer potentially for that if you like SQLite. But more and more of these things are being built for this Kotlin native, and I wouldn't be surprised within 5 years or so if we actually say, you know what, we're ditching the JVM on Android, we're going native.
What is Kotlin native exactly? It's a paradigm away from a JVM, right?
Yeah, so Kotlin as a language supports multiple platforms. They support the JVM, they support JavaScript, and they also support native. And so native is,
There's even a .NET, they call it .NET.
Is it really? Is it official or is that just a community thing?
It's a community thing right now, but Microsoft's, I mean, they're letting everyone, they're desperate, they're letting anyone do anything.
but so it's compiling down to basically the C level type thing. So you're getting SOs, SO files at that point. And you get the performance of that native layer, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, you lose the flexibility of being on JVM.
You lose some flexibility, but with how they built it, if you build it correctly, they have specs and actuals. And so you can actually say, hey, this is my interface layer. And depending on which platform I'm going to be on, I can provide that accordingly. And so the Kotlin conf app is written in Kotlin native, and it runs on both iOS and Android. It's 100% Kotlin. Things like that.
Now, one thing that I think would be cool is if Flutter does switch to Kotlin, you can use Flutter for your UI in Kotlin, and then Kotlin native for all of your logic and backend. And you could, with how Flutter's going, running on desktop, web, and mobile, so like could write once, run anywhere.
Yeah, JCortex has another talk of a real write once, compile everywhere, whatever it's called. If you want to look at that, I haven't read it or haven't watched it yet. Interesting concept.
One thing I'm excited about is more coroutine support
Yeah.
because it's fun stuff. At my work we use our app is very heavy in RX. We're starting to migrate it away from coroutines. Away to coroutines, and going from like this very verbose, like even in Kotlin, pretty verbose of like, subscribing and all that, and just do a couple lines in coroutines. So nice. Plus, it's a lot more readable, easier to learn. How many have played with coroutines?
Routines are great.
They're honestly really easy to pick up. Like when I tried to learn RX, like pretty steep learning curve. I still don't even fully know it.
You lose some bells and whistles from RX though, right?
Yeah, but those bells and whistles.
Are they really needed though?
Some of them like the bounce. The bounce is probably my favorite RX thing.
Yeah.
I love the bounce. Because it really provides a very responsive UI without pounding your back end too much, especially things like search and other type of things like that. But with coroutines, it's super easy to write that yourself. When you have your job, if the job's there, cancel it, and launch the coroutine again with that delay, and about 5 lines of code, and you have to bounce. And so in the other ones like flat map, other things like that, you can use all of that with coroutines. So there's not a lot that you're losing, and the fact that you're introducing flows into coroutines right now, so you get that same pipeline-esque feel, or RX feel, if you want.
Was there a talk at I/O about flows?
Not about flows, but about coroutines.
Right.
I said, Roman Elizarov, he's like the author of coroutines, recommend following him on Twitter, and he called out flows and he posted a blog post on it, and you can read about it. It's experimental right now. It's not, I don't know, I don't really use it. I don't do that much data processing in my apps, really utilize flows that much, personally. So flows are like RX. If you have this pipeline of things that you just need to get done, processing flows work really great for that. It gives you a lot of the RX-isms that you feel like you're missing. But
Also, if you couple coroutines with live data, like match made in heaven right there. Like super nice. And something I learned today. So in RX, there's like a .zip or something where you can like subscribe to multiple things.
Yeah.
And with live data, there's actually a mediator live data, which I didn't learn about till today, where you're able to basically observe multiple things.
What was that called again?
Mediator.
Mediator, live data.
Live data. So it's pretty easy to use.
I will say, if you ever want to bug Yeet, tell him how you're using live data in the background for like data processing and not for UI. He hates it.
Go off.
Yeah, because I mean, live data was built to solve one problem, and that's talking from back end to the UI. That's it. That's the only thing it should be used for. So if you're doing it for other things where you have like a bunch of things like that, where you're talking, hey, this service needs to talk to this other service, or other things like that, not what live data is for.
It's just supposed to be a view observing some changes in the back end.
It's just nice with, we are needing 2 sets of information. So it's just, once we have both of those, okay, now we're good to go.
Yeah, we actually just used it recently in our one data that we have, where we were combining 2 strings, so they basically had the same data, but they come from actually 2 different tables. But we needed to just combine them and then refilter and sort them by date and that mediator live date, because it was just really nice to be able to because it would be done.
Yeah, doing stuff with like just observing the live data and then in the coroutines just setting the value to stuff once you get it back. You see no delay and stuff like that. It's wonderful. What are some of your other guys' favorite talks or announcements
I was curious about Camera X. Has anyone, like,
We're-
is it like Camera API 3, basically?
I don't know.
We are going to be playing with it soon,
Okay.
mainly to make, because we use a camera in our app, and we experience crashes from phones saying they support autofocus, and then they actually don't, and then they crash. And so we're going to migrate that way.
Pulled out and just use the default camera app and get the information better because I'm tired of fighting with the camera APIs.
The one problem we have with our app, since it's a lot of sensitive information that people might not want stored on their phone,
Yeah.
unless it's encrypted, we can't do that.
So how many of you guys are modularizing your apps? Or not?
Android app. Right. I think in the settings, it's an Android library is what they call it.
Yeah, so the Android libraries and things like that.
Yeah, modularization.
Yeah, like how many modules do you guys have?
10, 15 maybe.
Yeah, we're like probably 8 and 12. A common one that's still pretty gnarly.
Haven't started yet. I'm trying to push for it.
Yeah, so we do a little differently. Like we have these like core libraries that all our apps use, and so everything's, they're the libraries, but they're like not inside the projects themselves.
Yeah.
And so we have really, really good compile times because of it, because it doesn't ever have to compile those modules.
Yeah.
They're already compiled and ready to go. But I'm wondering, 'cause I mean, they're pushing modularization really hard. Talking about, getting down to like 30, 40, 50 modules.
It's the single responsibility principle, right? And then not every module changes all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it allows you to, I mean, our company, we just barely pushed and got to a weekly release cycle. But we did it without monomodularization or doing a bunch of other things because that's what we wanted to do. Now we're going back and trying to modularize. And it's pretty bad because it's this big monolithic app and this team changes their piece, but then it blows up this piece. So we're trying to. Fortunately for us, iOS is ahead, so modularization.
And one kind of cool potential, like, with modularization, if you couple that with like the bundles and in the future with like the in-app updates and like just all the different ways you can couple that, makes it so you have a very customizable app that fits your user.
I'm sorry for dynamic features, but some of the things you have to do to use some of that, like reflection, is
Pros and
that'd be
cons.
cool. Yeah. Obviously, for navigation, you kind of handle most of that for us.
Yeah.
Would be nice.
I see navigation best used as like pockets of your app, as opposed to just thinking of one activity and everything's fragments, but you have probably groups of your app that have its own navigational graph, right? Are you using navigations in your apps?
Yep.
So how many navigational graphs do you have?
So usually we have the main graph, and there's some like key UI components, like a bottom nav, or the toolbar has a drop down that's just consistent. And once that changes, where those key parts either go away or change to something else, we usually switch to a different graph and a different activity at that point. So that's kind of how we've decided to use navigation. So it's not a pure one activity, all fragments, because you lose some of that with, like, you have to then have all your navigation pieces in one activity, and you have to like show and hide all of that. Whereas if you break it out based on certain like navigational components, it simplifies a lot of things that way. So that's how we've done it. And that makes using subgraphs and things really easy.
Yeah, we're just starting to use navigation library at Simple Nexus. And right now, how we're most likely going to be doing is like by feature, like as long as they're not like crossing too much by feature.
was a little surprised that they, at least I didn't see one mention of wireless.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they mentioned it in the
They-
fireside
they-
chat.
They announced tiles and I got it the very, next day. And it's cool, it's nice, but they didn't even mention that in anything. It's like,
And they still had a pretty good setup in the, what they call the booths,
The sandbox.
sandboxes,
Yeah.
which was about the same as they had last year. It's, 10, 12 launch models and a handful of engineers answer questions about it, but yeah.
Yeah, so the fireside chat's posted, so you can watch that. But yeah, they called it out, they asked if it was gonna go the way of Inbox and everything else, and they're like, no. It's, all the engineers in the sandbox right now, we're still supporting, we're still developing for it.
need to buy their own, since Qualcomm's kind of failing on the chipset, maybe roll their own like Apple did.
Well,
Actually show that they're
so-
serious.
a couple of years ago, there's talk of how Google was starting to develop their own chips, which you see that now with some of their
Their AI.
AI chips that they have. And then, past 2 years, at least last year, there's been the rumor of a Pixel Watch coming. So.
And then they bought Fossil, or the smart, or the smartwatch portion of Fossil.
Oh,
So.
So it'll probably come out in October. Like with the Pixel phones and everything else, when they bought HTC. Pixel. Okay. Anything else, or?
this is slide 2, right?
Yeah, the slide 3 was
Uh,
my question I already asked. I had the slides out of order, but.
Thanks.
Six state's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Used data binding, and then I turned on that kill activity thing, and I was like, wait, they don't do anything for that?
Yeah. Yeah, so we're using it in our apps right now, even though it's still at Alpha 1.
Yeah.
It was cool. So you called this out. If you didn't hear it, you should go watch the What's New in Jetpack. But he says once the libraries hit beta, they're production ready. The difference between alpha and beta is they can change the API to at any time. But once they hit beta, the API is stable. So they're just fixing bugs and other
Call it
things.
beta then.
They want to fix some bugs. Like I said, there's some bigger bugs in there that you occasionally come up against, other things that you need fixed, but for the most part, they do pretty well. And they recommend wait till at least beta before you start releasing production. But
For me, the one I could take to my family, because I'm like the only one there, was the Google Home, where she's listening to music in her kitchen, her phone rings, and she just does that.
Yeah.
And stops it. I was like, that's the coolest thing in the world.
Well, my favorite was the reaction to, with alarms, you can just say, stop,
Oh, that was-
instead of, hey, Google, stop.
Yeah.
Just stop.
We set timeout timers all the time, and I was like, hey, Google, stop. It'd be nice to just say stop.
yes, the new assistant on the phone, the next Pixel,
That's
where their normal voice
Oh, it's
recognition
all
stuff was like
local.
100 gigs,
yeah,
and they dropped it down to a half a gig.
that's
I know,
insane.
some of the, it's just amazing.
I wonder how much of that was discovered by an AI. Well, considering that they have a neural network that can find the best neural network, I wouldn't be surprised if it was.
Well, and I thought it was awesome how they explained too that, so for security purposes, so it built the, what do they call it, the models, and then without any PII, it sends those models, and they
It's
can,
the delta from the models.
Yeah,
and
and then like a
master the.
and then they can master, and then filter it back, so
Yeah.
so everybody who's using the assistant is training the assistant to help everybody else. Right. And I thought that was freaking crazy
So
and
what
awesome.
we're doing to all start using, so we get it out to everyone.
You will use my.
Though it'll be interesting because
Use that, Justin.
Oh, sorry.
they were showing it in the bottom right with the 2-button nav, where it showed the text. with the new gesture navigation, there's not that space for that, so it'll be interesting how they display that.
Well, have you seen the new, like squeeze?
Oh, yeah.
Sort of
Yeah,
devices?
activate.
Where it's like colored.
Yeah, it's just colored all the way across the bottom. I think it's prepping a bit for that.
I'm looking for that, like that, the assistant white drop bottom sheet thing is ugly.
I would love that for taking a picture like this, like trying to do selfie. So many times you're like trying to hold like this, so you can push the button.
Yeah.
So now you just do this and squeeze.
Mhm.
That would be cool.
Except like the new Pixels now will just snap the picture when it determines the AI
Text
determines.
smile.
Yeah, when it detects us, when everyone
You just
smiles,
say,
it
Hey
snaps the
Google,
picture.
take a
for you.
selfie, hold it up there, smile, and then take it. We'll lose the Hey Google part.
Yeah. Take a selfie.
Right,
Yeah.
just save it.
It'll be nice. I'm excited for that. That, I'm hoping it gets back ported to the previous Pixels, because that'd be nice, but
Or OnePlus.
yeah.
I love my OnePlus.
Me too. I can't go back to not having,
That switch.
that
oh,
switch is
gosh.
like amazing. I got that and I'm like, I don't know, I can never go back to not having that.
Tomorrow I'm gonna go play with the 7 Pro to see if I wanna upgrade or not.
Looks really cool.
What's the switch?
A hardware
Oh,
switch?
it's, I guess,
It's even better than iOS's.
yeah,
Or
I guess
Apple's.
they have one.
Silencer.
No, it's
Yeah.
OnePlus.
Well, you have it's
But it
a
has,
two-stage,
you can
so I
set
have
it to,
all on
like when I'm
vibrate.
out and about and I want everything muted, just slide it up.
It's
Yeah,
I don't
I
have
was,
to
my
go
mom got an
into
iPhone
my
after
phone at
like
all.
10 years
It
and
just-
was like, look at this.
So like I go to
use
bed
it
and I
as much as you
forget
can.
that I left it
Like,
on.
put that on.
I hear a notification happen, I'm like, oh,
Switch it off.
What's that?
switch it on, so
don't, and I can do it all by feel. Just- So I love it, because
Hmm.
I forget to do things and turn things
I will
on.
say, to be honest, I'm not that impressed with the light changes.
With the what?
Oh, yeah, it's just,
Kind of try it again.
it's just storage.
But it is, and they've done some nice things about it, so it doesn't take forever to compile the first time. But it's, I haven't gotten a lot of any of my apps. So it may just be that my apps that are architected, like, so you don't really get the benefits.
Or they're just too big. Maybe not, I don't know.
Honestly, like, they've also just improved in general, like, rerunning stuff.
Yeah, it builds so fast anyways.
Yeah,
It's
like if it's a minor change.
Well, I mean, with the incremental, I mean, that's one thing I do need to throw into my library is get the incremental KPT working. I just haven't had time yet, but I don't want to be that library either. Currently am. Yeah, that is a nice feature is the incremental compile time. It gets sped up a lot of our apps. If you're not using the latest Dagger, please use the latest Dagger. They actually save about 40% of their compile time by getting rid of their stupid formatting.
Wow.
It wasn't Google I/O, but I'm excited for the update to Android Auto, the interface update.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I use that every day and I've always been like, this is too simplistic for my,
I just want to use my voice the whole time. I hate tapping the thing while I'm trying to drive. I'm like, you can just listen to me. Like, stop this.
yeah. And so once the assistant too is on local on your device,
Yeah.
It's gonna be a beautiful day.
Well,
serious.
good talks.
Good, yeah, thank you, Mitch.
Is there any recommended talks, like you have to watch a certain one?
The ones I've heard Jetpack compose, everybody should watch that.
And coroutines. I want to see
I
that.
haven't watched that one yet, so
I haven't watched that. You should watch that one.
A lot of good things. I heard the day of, like the day 3 last session keynotes that were like the thought leaders and
Oh, those ones,
the
the
fireside
fireside chats?
Yeah, the fireside chats. I heard a lot of people talking them up. I went to one and thought it was okay.
Which one
With
did you go
the
to?
one with Google X.
Oh,
I used to love the sessions with Dina Dugan. They were so cool, and it's kind of like
All the
all the
touch
cool
screen.
stuff.
so I will say that area had the best seats.
Yeah. Couches and yeah.
Lawrence Ion talked with Hiroshi. Buckheimer, that was pretty good.
Yeah, I heard that was really good.
Like, it wasn't like anything like dev related, like good. It's just like,
Well, it was nice because if you wanted to learn a little bit about fuchsia and kind of the direction they're looking at that, so then you can It's very politically answered, but it gives you some insight.
It's a lot better answered than any other time it's been asked.
Yes.
Because all the other times they're like, oh, we don't work on it, we don't know. And he's like, yeah, it's just something we're playing with.
They're still very heavily invested in Android and Chrome OS. And the notion of few ships potentially being like an IoT operating system or just kind of this operating system for things that aren't phones and laptops. That's a lot of like, yeah, that actually makes less sense.
Did they talk much about Chromebooks supporting more Android apps or things of that?
There was a great talk on Chromebooks and supporting them. You should really watch it, especially about UI designs and things like that, just to support the bigger screens.
And developing on a Chromebook, like Android Studio,
No.
which I thought was kind of
They
strange.
said they have a one-touch install.
Yeah, so they do have a deb, and it does install, and it does work, and you can compile. It is slower than dirt. If you have like the i5, it's not worth it. If you have the i7, you might be able to move forward with it. So right now you can install to a device, and you can install to an emulator, but you can't install it to the Chromebook itself.
Okay, that seems
Because they're essentially, it's 3 different operating systems operating on the same machine. You have Linux, which is where Android Studio is running. You have Chrome OS, then you have the Android runtime, and they're all sandboxed from each other. And so they're hoping to get a point where they can actually send apps over the Android runtime from Studio. And there's rumor that there's a new Chromebook that's actually meant for developers. Have decent enough RAM and processors and everything else to actually go with it.
weird they dropped Project Campfire to dual boot, so you can also boot into Windows.
Yeah.
I heard they dropped that, so.
I don't know, 21% growth of Chromebooks over the last year.
Whoa.
Yeah, or no, so 20% of all laptop sales were Chromebooks.
Oh, wow, still.
So Chromebooks are really, they're
My
awesome.
daughter's schools have
Oh,
tons
yeah,
of Chromebooks.
yeah.
So it's
And she loves it.
definitely worth developing for, definitely worth like having your apps support the bigger screen. And understand that even with foldables, having your apps support like a tablet screen, utilizing all of that. Because I mean, Hiroshi's even, he's very like, foldables are here to stay. It's not going to be a passing fad like 3D screens and all these other things. Like it's legitimate things.
Folded laptop. They've got Lenovo has a demo for it. So it will fold all the way to a 13-inch slate, but you can also fold it in half and type on it. I was like, yes, because I want a worse typing experience than MacBooks.
At least if it breaks, it's the screen that's breaking rather than like just a random key.
That's true.
And just don't peel off like the screen protector.
Don't peel off the protective layer.
But it's interesting to see how like the foldables come out. So the Hiroshi talk, there are some good things about it, but like he mentioned, like foldables, they come from like foldables. Like Google didn't say, hey, let's do foldables. Samsung didn't say, let's do foldables. It was actually the screen manufacturer saying, hey, look, mini screen. What can you do with it? And that's kind of how that process goes. And he says most ideas are that way. It comes from the suppliers of like the components. Saying, hey, here's how to do a fingerprint on a piece of glass. Here's how to do all these things, and it just starts flowing through.
Speaking of working with OEMs, they did say that with gestures, they're working with all of the OEMs, relatively all of them, to make sure that it's going to be across the board.
Well, with Android, they're only supporting those 5.
Yeah.
Or 3.